We will begin because you're here, we're here, so the appointed hour has arrived. So hello and welcome to the second of the Writers Guild of Great Britain's Festival of Game Writing. We've got the second event today, which is interactive portfolios, as you can probably read on your screen even. The event's been organised and hosted by the Writers Guild of Great Britain, which is a TUC-affiliated union that represents writers working in TV, film, radio, theatre, animation, books, and of course, more than that, including video games, which is why we are here today. We are here to offer advice, contract vetting events, and we publish the Writers Guild of Great Britain video games guidelines. And I'm happy to say that following last year's survey, we will be publishing a new and updated version of those later this year, hopefully in relatively near future, in the next sort of few months. You can see a link to our current set of guidelines on the screen now. So if you want to screen grab that, you can find those there. You'll also find other information on the Writers Guild website for other media and to help you, and of course, to join, because my name is Andrew Walsh. I'm the co-chair of the Video Games Committee, along with Samantha Webb. I'm also a freelance writer, and I mention that because although the union has a full-time staff, including Nadine, who is hiding right at the moment, we do also rely on a lot of volunteers who are full-time writers, and that's to make sure that we are up to date with what's going on in the industries and representing writers' interests. So if you join us, you not only get all of that help, but you can help us and you can join the committee and help organise events like this. We couldn't have made tonight happen without our sponsors, Artisy Software, who've also sponsored the other 4 panels we're having this week. There's still time to sign up for those, including tomorrow's panel, which is Dialogue as Text, the unspoken secrets of writing interactive dialogue. And I'm happy to say that Ed Fear of Murder by Numbers fame is going to be joining us for that panel. He's just been able to confirm that with us today. So we have a new panelist for that panel tomorrow. So please do grab your tickets for that. Artisy will be running a separate event on their Twitch channel at 7:30 on Thursday, right after Thursday's panel on procedural generation. And that's going to cover how Artisy Draft works and give you an introduction to that software if you want to explore how to get automatic formatting, how to write it for different media, etc. Please note that today chat is off, but you can still send us polite questions on the Q&A. Weird's fine, but keep them polite. Questions on the Q&A, and we'll be trying to respond to those in the panel or by text. If you have any technical problems, please do just use the Zoom link to rejoin us. And without further ado, because that's more than enough natter from me, I will pass you across to this evening's chair, Samantha Webb. Thank you for coming along.
Thank you very much, Andy. Hello to everyone watching live, and hello to everyone catching up on this at a later date. So I'm Samantha Webb. I'm here to chair the evening. As Andy said, I'm the co-chair of the Writers Guild Video Games Committee with him. So we've been working together this year to put on events like this and carry out other work for video game writers with the Guild. I'm a writer and a narrative designer full-time as well as writing in my spare time and in the evenings, like I think a lot of us probably do. Now, I am joined by 3 really fantastic panelists this evening who are all going to share their wisdom and advice on game writing portfolios, interactive writing portfolios. So I'm going to turn to them and get them to introduce themselves. I'll go in the order that you are on my screen. So Ed, if you're happy to introduce yourself first.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. My name's Ed Sibley. I'm currently employed as the narrative director at Fusebox Games, a studio best known for our work on the Love Island game, a mobile adaptation of the television program of the same name. And I suppose the sort of relevance of my experience to this panel is that we've hired quite a lot of full-time writers over the last couple of years, and we currently have a team of 17, I think, full-time writers that we brought in, and as part of my sort of journey with the company, I've spent a lot of time kind of like reviewing portfolios and going through applications and so forth. And so I hope, when I talk about what seems to work and what seems not to work in a portfolio, I'm doing so from a reasonable breadth of experience there.
Thank you very much. Anna, you're up next.
Yay. I'm Anna Mcgill. I have been knocking around this industry for a pretty long time now, and I've worked at a lot of studios, both in primarily North America and in Europe and Scandinavia. Places like Nintendo, ArenaNet, Arcane Studios for Dishonored, Remedy, Massive Entertainment in Sweden, and now I am currently the lead writer here at Playground Games, working on Fable. And I think I'm here today because I am a hiring manager, but I've been on both sides of hiring for a very long time. Like, I've moved around to a lot of studios, so I know both what gets results in my own portfolio and what I am looking for when I hire people to come work on AAA projects with me. So I am very excited to talk about that today and make my job easier. So yeah, hi.
Thank you. And we're very excited to have you in the UK with us at the moment.
Yay, I can't believe I'm here. Am I really here? I don't know.
Who knows?
Yeah.
You look like you're really here.
Thank you. Virtually, I'm here.
Exactly. Awesome. And Tom?
It's anarchy in the UK. Hi, I'm Tom Abernathy. I am currently the studio narrative director at ArenaNet, where we just dropped the finale to our most recent season this morning, the Icebridge Saga. I have been working in games as a writer. When I first was trying to get in, there was no such thing as a narrative designer. That wasn't a phrase anybody had come up with yet. So I've worked on a ton of games, the big ones that people usually have heard of: Destroy All Humans 1 and 2, The Saboteur. I worked on Halo Reach. I was at Riot for a year, futilely trying to make a dent in League of Legends, and worked on the Division, and now most recently, of course, on Guild Wars 2. I've worked with Pandemic Studios, the name of which is ironic at this point, Microsoft, Riot, ArenaNet, and with a whole bunch of other studios when I was at Microsoft especially, or as a contractor. And like Anna, I too am a hiring manager. And I think after how do I get into the games industry, which is the first most common question that I get asked, the second is, what do people want to see in terms of my writing portfolio? So this is, I know, a topic that is really super important to a lot of folks aspiring to get in the industry. And as I'm sure you'll hear today, one of the problems is there's not a lot of standardization in terms of what people expect. So we'll get into how you handle that. Happy to be here. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. So as you can hear, between the three of our panelists, there's a years and years of experience on both sides of this question. Both submitting portfolios and wondering if they're the right kind of portfolio for that studio, and being on that hiring side, and what works and what does get people the interviews and the writing tests, etc. So I suppose a good place to start off, because this is something that I remember, I struggled with when I first heard of this idea of portfolios and having a portfolio as a writer, is what does it actually look like in its basic form? Like, is it, are we talking about a portfolio of interactive games, like, time games and ink games that you're sending people to play? Or are most portfolios kind of a written document effectively that have, in the form of a written script and written barks that people look at? Does anyone want to kick off? If you're happy to kick off, wave your hands, and otherwise I'll pick on people as we go. Okay, Tom, I'm going to go with you. Oh,
Okay.
sorry, Anna.
I
was gonna
almost raised my
volunteer.
hand.
Yeah. Well, let's
Yeah,
go
I
with
almost raised
Tom,
my-
since I was
You
late.
sure?
No, I don't
Okay.
care.
So yeah, I mean, just to follow up on what I said a second ago, I think what's a challenge for folks who are applying for jobs in this industry as narrative designers / writers is that everybody wants to see different stuff, right? And even more than that, like, some people want to see things you've written, other people want to give you a test, a thing to write, a prompt, and have you do spec work, which we all as writers love, to show them what you can do, which, particularly if you have any kind of body of work behind you, is, I think, kind of insulting. I don't believe in writing tests, and I would never make one and ask people to do it off the bat. We at ArenaNet, Bobby Stein and I have occasionally asked folks, because so much of what we do is very dialogue for the spoken word heavy, right? Actors performing it. We tend to need to hire for the skills that go into being a screenwriter, for lack of a better analogy, right? And so if someone is applying and we really think they've given us some interesting stuff in terms of fiction or other stuff like that, but they haven't given us something that sort of shows what they can do in that format, we may ask them to like take a piece that they, like a short story they gave us, and convert part of it to say 5 or 10 pages of a screenplay, just to see if they have a feel for how that might go. But I think the two most likely things that people who are hiring are going to want is either they'll give you a test or they will want you to send in samples. Most people don't like to read. This is a thing to be aware of. It's not true of me. Everything I'm about to say, for the most part, is not true of me, but it's true. It's true of a lot of other places in the industry. People don't like to read. Usually they will want no more than 10 pages at the very most. Sometimes as little as 3. I think the best way to approach being prepared for anything is to have a portfolio of things you can pull from, right? So personally, I like range. I want to see people's dexterity between genres, tones, moods, all that kind of stuff. And so what I love to see is, if you're going to send me 10 pages, send me, 2 or 3 different samples that sort of show a breadth of what you can do. And I think it's smart in general to have 3, 4, 5, 6 samples of varying lengths and various, they're different from each other in terms of tone and mood and genre. Just so you can really demonstrate what you can do. And if the person you're applying to, if the company you're applying to wants something very specific, then you've got something that speaks to that. You can hand them. If they're like, you're applying for our Space Marines game, you better have written for Space Marines games before, right? Having a sci-fi thing that you can hand them is a pretty good idea.
Great, thank you.
I'll pause there. Yeah.
Anna, do you want to jump in there?
I am now going to contradict everything that Tom just said.
Oh, thank goodness. That's good. That'll make it slightly easier for me to do the same, I think.
That's normally how these panels go.
In America, caption, in America. Everything I just said is true in America. I don't know about the UK.
I'm not going to contradict everything. I do agree that it's nice to have a range of things, as long as there is also something in there that speaks to that specific role that you are applying for. Yes, so if this is a gritty detective thriller sort of game, please don't send me your high fantasy elf script, because I'm not even going to read it. It's just not the kind of stuff that I need. I don't mind reading, actually. I like reading. I'm not going to read more than 10 pages, as Tom said. I think that's a really good sort of rule of thumb. And I've noticed that more and more companies are starting to spell out pretty specifically what they want to get from you. I think Telltale sort of famously used to ask for an entire screenplay, like full-length feature screenplay. Great for them if that's what they wanted to read. But I mean, I know that when I'm, unfortunately, the time that I have to look at someone's writing samples is like usually in between 2 meetings, or I've grabbed a spare half hour somewhere, and I need to see as quickly as I can and as accessibly as I can what they're putting on the page. I like to see written stuff because as a writer, that is your deliverable. I mean, yes, it will be translated into something into the game. Different departments, audio and cinematics and, animation will all take what you've created and add their own brilliance to it. But what you are producing that I will be working with you on is the word on the page. Now, seeing that screenplay and seeing it with a video or a clip of the gameplay or something, so I can see how that translated to the final project, for me, that's ideal. That's what I would love to see, your raw work and then what it looked like polished and in the game. So if you could put that in your portfolio, you would make me a very happy hiring manager. And Ed, I will let you jump in and contradict me now. It's okay.
Oh, I think broadly I agree with both of you. I totally agree about like sitting down to read portfolios being something that it's often hard to make time for, particularly given that it's like reviewing portfolios is a tricky job in as much as you feel both quite a tremendous sense of responsibility towards the people whose work that you're reviewing, but on the other hand, typically one doesn't review a portfolio, one reviews like a dozen or 50, or the last time the Fusebox put like an entry-level job live, we got like something in the region of like 500 applications, each of which came with a portfolio attached. And in that respect, just kind of like working out how we would even sort of like fairly determine what what criteria we were looking for between the several different people that we had reviewing them was kind of a task in and of itself. I guess maybe a useful thing, something that I would kind of like to say in response to that question is perhaps just to like characterize the role that like a portfolio has in the process that we've used at Fusebox, which is that when you get an application, it comes with a CV and with a cover letter and so forth, and those are, sometimes there's a good one and sometimes there's a bad one, but for the vast majority of them, it's very hard to like read a CV or a cover letter and really kind of get a sense of that individual. I would tend to say of that whole side of the application process that a successful cover letter is one which kind of gives me a sense of who you are as a person. But then when it comes to reviewing portfolio, really like the main thing that it has to do, as far as we're concerned, is to demonstrate the rudiments that we need in the people that we have in that role, which in the it's going to vary significantly from studio to studio. Obviously, like games are, of all the cultural media, like the most heterogeneous. There's no two studios that are working on two games that are even kind of remotely similar when you get down into the nuts and bolts of it. Fusebox makes games predominantly kind of based on like what's ostensibly supposed to be like real contemporary reality, which is kind of unusual in its own way, and they're choice based and they're about romance. So what I need a portfolio to do is I need to demonstrate that the person has a basic handle on the things that are like I say, the rudiments of the craft that are relevant to us. So in our case, that's I need to see some dialogue. I need to see some stuff in there that's funny, because our games have humor at their heart. I need to see that you're able to sort of hopefully like write a choice of some sort. But then beyond those, yes, I would agree that like it shouldn't be terribly overlong. I think that the 10-page number seems about right, because by the time I've read 10 pages of somebody's thing, I expect I've probably made my mind up by then of whether or not I have a high opinion of their dialogue or not, for example. Yes, that's the thing for me, is that like if it contains a range of stuff, I would think that like the right way to tailor it is to make sure that there are things in there that are particular to whatever your understanding is of the game that you'll be working on.
Yeah, can I just add one thing to what you said in particular, and to further contradict Tom, because I just can't seem to stop. Writing tests, that's not what this conversation is about. But for me, if I'm not seeing what I need to see in your samples, like your portfolio hasn't provided me with the work that I want, but I feel that there's real talent there, and I want to sort of give you another chance in a way, then I will give you a writing test. Or if I'm on the fence about two writers who are both equally talented, for me, the writing test is sort of the deal breaker, or the extra shot, or just that extra little bit of information that might push you over the edge into getting the role. And I think that's how it should be used. And it should respect the person's time. I'm not going to go into all the rules of writing tests, but yeah, I don't think it should be used as an initial screening device, or as part of the portfolio process. So I do agree with you there, Tom. There, we're in agreement.
I am, if I may respond to all the savage attacks over the last 6 minutes.
Blistering attack.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think what you guys are seeing is kind of what I started off saying, which is every hiring manager kind of wants to see something different, right? And they have their own sense of values and their own sense of what matters, what's important, what will show them what they want to see. And so I'm not surprised at all, actually, that you're hearing three somewhat different perspectives about this, because we all have our process. And we are going to design our process in a way, hopefully, we hope, to foreground the things about you as an applicant that we're most interested in knowing, and in getting a quick handle on, because these guys are right. We don't have a lot of time, for sure. And we do frequently get hundreds of applicants for a position. At the same time, I'm always conscious of the fact, just to give you a sense of my values for a second and why I go about it the way I do, I'm always conscious of the fact that I may be working with this person for the next 2, 3, 5 years, whatever it is, right? And so this is not a small decision. It's a very important decision because I really don't like working with people who are difficult to work with, for one thing, right? And so, you know, finding that out is a good thing. And the other thing is I guess I think of all of this less from my perspective than I do from the applicant's perspective. I know what it's like to be applying for a job and to have to, you know, to be kind of flying blind, you can feel like a lot of times in terms of trying to show them what you think they want to see, but will also show you off at your best advantage. And I want people to show themselves off to their best advantage. I am looking for reasons to say yes to move you to the next round, not to say no. It's easy to say no. I can tell, honestly, it doesn't matter how many pages you give me, and I will accept, Bobby and I, we accept up to a full feature screenplay or 50 pages of prose. We won't read that much, most likely, because we will know within the first few pages whether we need to keep reading or not. And at this point, I think all of us who do this, we've developed those kinds of instincts and antenna. And so, you know, yeah, it's tough. I recognize it's tough because you're going to get different attitudes from different folks for sure.
Yeah, I suppose there's a, oh, sorry.
No,
okay,
Ed, you go ahead. I can...
Oh, well, I was going to say that there is kind of an optimistic dimension to that same thing, though, right? Which is that there's lots of different studios that need lots of different things, and that's kind of wonderful, right? Maybe the silver lining of that is, you know, there's a studio out there for everybody. You know, no matter what your thing is, there might be some, yeah, maybe the right position just hasn't sort of appeared on LinkedIn yet or whatever.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're applying and you're at all unclear about what they want from you, a good way to sort of suss out what that is to just ask the recruiter or ask whoever it is that your contact is, to make sure that you understand the instructions, and that will give you a sense of what they're looking for. Like, I'm happy to tell you what I'm looking for because I want you to be able to deliver it. I'm not trying to trick you or trap you. I just want to see your good work and what that looks like. So ask. Don't be afraid to. Most recruiters just forward the questions to us, we answer them, and then get them back to you. So don't be afraid. Don't hesitate.
Good. That's a great piece of advice. I wish people did that more.
Yeah.
Definitely some really good thoughts and advice coming out from this. And I think the fact that you know, there is a little bit of contradiction going on and a little bit of, oh, you know, it depends, or, you know, depends where you're applying, depends what you want, etc. Kind of shows a bit like why this is such a hot topic to discuss, right? Because especially if you're on the outside, you know, if you're, you know, you want to be a writer and you're trying to get into that, or maybe you're a writer in a different industry and you're trying to move across, it can be a bit of a brick wall, because you don't, you know, it's not like with artists, it's quite easy to go and see some really good art portfolios online, but it's not quite the same with writing. So yeah, there's been some really great advice in here, I think, between, you know, what kind of things to be including in your portfolio, how to present it, asking, yeah, absolutely, like, don't be afraid to ask. I think that's something that again, you know, I have been a writer for a whole 2.5 years now, I think. So, you know, I can remember the early days of, you know, panic applying and just not knowing what people really wanted, and even now, you know, it's still, when I apply for things, I'm still pretty much feeling my way in the dark, because you know, I haven't got that level of experience yet. But really, I think, you know, the ways that I've been successful is by doing that research. You know, I think you can't just apply blindly and hope to succeed. Like, you've got to put a bit of work in yourself. So yeah, whether that's finding someone on the inside that can answer your questions, or whether that's doing your due diligence on, like you said, Ed, like, you know, if it's a funny game that they're making, then get some funny samples in there. If it's dark and gritty, get the dark and gritty. Like, it's up to you to kind of go and do that bit of work yourself, so that you know the kind of writing that they've done before. So even if it's a completely different game or IP that they're developing, at least you can show that you've put thought into your portfolio and what you're presenting them with. So yeah, hopefully, like that's I feel like I learned a lot just from that, you know, that kickoff myself. So thank you.
I think the important thing to remember is that on the other side of that recruiting equation is one of us. You know, are we intimidating? Oh, I wish we were, but we're not. I mean, so the next time, you know, you're applying, you know, just think of us sitting here in our little boxes, and that's who you're talking to.
I like it.
It's true. Yeah, it's very true.
And so when so I mentioned that, you know, we, at least, you know, I've had when I go to networking events and I talk to people who do want to get into game writing, I do often speak to a lot of people who are, you know, maybe they have a screenwriting background, or maybe they've written for TV or radio, or, you know, maybe they're novelists and they just really want to get into games. So one of the questions we've actually had from our audience is exactly this, like questions for writers moving over from other spaces. You know, does your portfolio, at least at the start, does it have to be all games writing from the beginning, or you know, what other writing could they include there? Like, our studio is interested in seeing maybe radio scripts, or you know, prose samples, or TV scripts. Like, what is the level of acceptance, I suppose, of non-games writing for someone who's presumably going for probably an entry-level junior role, who's come from a different industry but has writing experience?
Well, so again, I can speak to what we found to be useful in our experience at Fusebox, is that, like, I'm going to say the word rudiments a lot. I realise now that's the word that's stuck in my head. But like, from my point of view, like, if I have to, you know, I'm looking for somebody who, you know, I know is going to come on in an entry level capacity in my project. And what I need to establish about them before, you know, I move them to the next stage of the hiring process is, you know, do they have these kinds of core skills in place? Whether it's a radio script or a piece of TV writing or you know, prose fiction or any of that, like, as long as I'm able to find in it the things that I'm interested in. I mean, I'm interested in the applicant in general, right? Like, which, you know, I want to know kind of who they are as a person, and their writing probably reflects that to a certain extent. But yeah, like for me, it's relevant as long as it does express characteristics that I'm definitely interested in. You know, Anna's point about, you know, not necessarily wanting like a high fantasy thing about elves if you're looking for a gritty realist thing is also completely true, to contradict myself though, which is that, you know, if it's kind of closer to the sort of general tone of the subject matter, that's going to be more healthy. But I at least have never found any particular value in stipulating that it must be in such and such a format or such and such a medium of thing. Yeah.
I think almost any career could translate to games, as long as you show interactive writing the respect that it deserves, and you understand the difference between that and the other types of writing that you've done. What I do sometimes see are people coming over from another industry, and this is going to sound really terrible, but they don't think you can teach them anything. Like, they think that they know how to write because they can write really well in their own particular discipline. And there are a lot of sort of tricks of the trade to game writing, things that you really have to learn over time to make it work, and to understand how, you know, game writing fits into the larger structure of the game. And there are rhythms and processes and a whole bunch of things that go with it. So if you're a novelist, and you're a great novelist, you can't necessarily just jump right into game writing and know everything that you need to know. I've very rarely encountered anyone who comes with that attitude. Most people are really humble about it and understand that they are learning a new craft, essentially, and, you know, are eager to learn and have learned some. And I need to see that reflected in your portfolio, though. Like, if you're just giving me pages from your novel, that doesn't necessarily say that you'll be a great game writer. I do think that drama, like people who write for the theater, that does translate really well for some reason into game writing. And I've seen a lot of, I think Andy Walsh, for example, who's helped put together this panel, started out in the theater. And, you know, it's a really easy transition to make, I think, more so than people who just, you know, I don't want to say just, than people who are also perhaps writing for novels. But yeah, I see Tom has something to say, so.
No, I mean, what you said made me just think of, you know, the tale of the Hollywood writer. When in the earlier days, back in the what we in America sometimes refer to as the aughts, and I have been schooled by British folks that you guys say noughts, but you know what I'm saying, 2000 to 2010, that decade, yeah. Right?
The noughties.
The noughties, exactly. The noughties. You know, it's funny because I actually, first of all, I started in theater as an actor when I was a kid, a professional actor, and I was theater director. And then I went to film school, and I didn't start writing really until I was in film school and started writing screenplays for myself to direct. And you know, I have found that theater skills, it's amazing how many of them really are portable to games in a lot of ways, especially immersive theater, interactive theater, which is a pretty big thing now. We hired a story editor probably about 2.5, 3 years ago now, who had no experience in games, but had done that. Produced a lot of interactive theater, and the skill set was perfect. It was exactly what we wanted. And so I found that happens a lot. But what happened, what was going on 15, 16 years ago was there were a lot of writers in Hollywood who kept reading these articles in Variety about how huge the revenue stream was in games and how it was bigger than movies and television, all this stuff. And they started seeing little dollar signs in their eyes and thinking, ooh, I can get another way of making income by working in games. But they did not do what Anna just said. They did not at all respect the medium. They would come in and very much act like, I'm going to tell you what good writing is about and tell you what you need. And notoriously, and I saw companies like dealing with this as recently as like 5 years ago, they would turn in 200 pages of material that was unusable because they hadn't made any effort to understand the principle that I was talking about. On our team, we have basically 3 things that we hire for. We have a very specific philosophy of not hiring for things that can be easily or readily taught and learned, right? That doesn't, to us, that's a thing that will happen by course. If you've never played Guild Wars 2, in a month, you'll be able to get up to speed in Guild Wars 2. If you need the lore, you can read the wiki or you can watch long play videos, all this kind of stuff. If you don't know our tool, which you probably don't, you won't enjoy learning it, but you can do that pretty well in a month or 2. But the things that can't be quickly or readily learned or taught, first of all, demonstrable writing skills on the page. And as I said, at ArenaNet, at least at the moment, mostly that means dialogue because that's the main thing we traffic in. And the majority of it is spoken by actors. Secondly, we don't require that you have worked in games before because that is a thing, as Anna is saying, it's very important, but that is actually a thing that we can help you get up to speed on pretty quickly. However, if you haven't worked in games before, we do expect you to have been creative in another medium and be a gamer, be someone who plays a lot of games, and then taken that mindset to the act of playing games and have thought about how you would go about playing a game or writing, creating a game, rather, writing a game. What are the sort of ways of thinking about it, the ways of approaching it that you can see as analogous to the work that you have done, right? So you put yourself in the mindset of dev, even if you've never done that before. And then the third one, again, is that you have strong collaboration skills because life's too short to work with jerks.
Yeah, I really like that. I would just like to add that given that we're on portfolios and bearing in mind the comments from the 2 panelists about respecting the medium, it's worth considering that like when you have things that are not necessarily games writing that you're including in your portfolio, you could always try to like find ways to sort of indicate that they kind of those things are kind of expressive of skills that are relevant to games, right? I should imagine that one of the reasons why people from like an immersive theatre background are often well suited to games and make that transition with success is because it's an intensely collaborative thing, the theatre, right? Like, you're with a group of people have got very different disciplines and you're working in very kind of close proximity with them. And perhaps it's the case that if what you have is a screenplay or a radio play, but you include it because you say, look, not only does this show that I can do good dialogue, but it shows that I can like take an edit, or I can be sensitive to some shifting format parameters, or I can I can respond to a last minute change of direction, or that's been necessitated by a change of budget, for example. Like those kinds of things are fully relevant to games, and if those kinds of soft skills that are useful for games writing are evidenced by work that you've done, I would say that it's definitely worth including that stuff.
I'm now going to contradict all of us, including me, because I'm on a roll tonight. There is such a thing as being too focused on the interactivity of it all. I sometimes get people who they're so deep into writing for games that they will sometimes send me a spreadsheet full of just lines of dialogue with no context. So it's just a list of lines. I'm sure they're in order. I'm sure they're related to something, but without the context, without knowing how this fits into a larger story, it tells me nothing. I can't tell if this was a good line of dialogue, if there was a payoff to this setup. I mean, there's just no way to tell. And I'm sure that in the game, when those fire off, they're brilliant, right? But when I'm looking at that spreadsheet, even though I know that that's something that it's a tool that we use, that you're kind of winking at me a little bit going, yeah, I know this is how we write a lot of the time. It doesn't tell me about you as a writer. All it does is tell me that you're familiar with writing in spreadsheets, which I'm sorry. I'm deeply sorry that you are familiar with that experience. But if you're going to send something like that, contextualize the lines for me. You know, put them in order. Tell me who these people are. Give me some kind of setup, just enough so that I can understand what these lines are doing. What are they in service to? Because otherwise, they're just random lines, and I don't understand. I'm sorry. I just don't understand. And I won't read them. So don't do that.
Yeah, I mean the number of applications that you get where they have like a very articulate sort of cover letter where they really introduce themselves with aplomb, and then, you know, like a CV that has something relevant on it perhaps, but then the kind of the substance of their portfolio is just, you know, 4 PDFs and 1 Excel spreadsheet that they've just kind of dropped into their email as unsorted attachments. Like it's difficult to know where to start. Like where am I to look here for the things they demonstrate? Far better, like always contextualize your portfolio pieces. I just think it's the most low-hanging fruit in the thing that you can do most straightforwardly to best differentiate yourself from the crowd. I think in the whole process application is to give the hiring manager a clue as to where you'd like them to start, so that, you know, the things they're looking for, that they know where to look for them.
I would go a step further and say that you should curate and offer almost like a written guided tour of your portfolio. Like when I'm looking through it, it should tell me a story. I think a lot of people are tempted to do it chronologically, and I've taken a stand on this many times before. Don't do that. Put whatever your strongest work is at the top, because I am guaranteed to see that, and I am not guaranteed to see anything else. So I don't care if the best thing you ever wrote was 10 years ago and, you know, you've written something since, but they're just not quite as powerful. Put that thing first. Let me see that. That's what I want to know about. And then sort of let me know what each thing was. At what point in your career did you write this? What was it for? You know, just sort of show me, like, what does this mean to you? What does this mean to your career? Guide me around and help me understand how this all fits together. That's a good portfolio. It presents a picture of you as the writer and tells me who you are and what you can produce, and lets me see growth if there was growth, and, you know, lets me see the variety of things that you've worked on. I love looking at a portfolio like that. It makes me very happy, and I feel like I've shaken hands with you and had a conversation when I come out of that. It's a really good introduction to a writer.
Yes, I just want to like ring a bell or something and just be like, yes, do that. Everything Anna just said, write that down.
I do love that idea of telling a story through your portfolio. Like that's really lovely. And I suppose it's, you know, again, a really good point that's being raised here is that, you know, when it comes to the hiring manager, you know, the person that's reading your portfolio and your samples at the end of the day, you know, they're a human being. They're just as stressed and just as busy and just as rushed as the rest of us. And it's in our best interest as, you know, people applying for these roles to make their lives as easy as possible, because the easier, you know, that I as an applicant can make it for you, the more chance I stand, right? Because exactly, if I put my best piece first and it's all in it's in a single PDF document with everything kind of clearly signposted as to what it is, where it's going, why it's there, then yeah, I can only imagine that being a hiring manager and getting that email, like you said, Ed, with the different, you know, 5 different PDFs in, you're just gonna I'm just gonna look at the next one, and you've just instantly lost your chance then just through not formatting something, you know, to make it easy to read, basically.
That's such an important point. I mean, accessibility. If I have to work really hard to look at your samples, I'm not going to. I will tell you a horror story now. We had a candidate who applied for a role, and she kept directing us to her Patreon to look at her samples. So we would have had to become patrons of her work in order to just see any example of what her writing was. And we tried to work with her, like, can you please just give us like a page, just something we can look at to see. And she just kept referring us back to this Patreon link. We were not going to pay $2 to look at a sample of her work. I mean, she could have been an amazing writer. We will never know because, you know, it's just not going to happen. Make it easy for me to look at your work.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I'm still in a little bit of shock about that one.
Great story though. I'm going to go to a couple of the, obviously we've been getting questions coming through live as we go. So one that popped up a bit earlier on, which is a really great one, which is once you've become more established in your career, so, you know, once you've probably got a couple of writing gigs under your belt and you've written for a couple of games, how do you build and maintain a portfolio when your previous writing is under NDA, not released yet? You know, you're not allowed to share script extracts. You can probably only share the finished product. Yeah, how do you go about kind of maintaining a portfolio when your work becomes kind of more and more secretive, I suppose, as you go on?
The curse of our industry. I mean, I know people who've worked for 10 years on various projects and have nothing they can show. My advice on this, and I have been in this situation several times, is talk to the studio about getting permission for something. You know, show them a version of it where you've basically filed the names off, like filed the serial number off, you know, change names, changed a few things so it's not identifiable as being from their franchise or whatever, and see if they'll let you release that. But, you know, don't break your NDA. I can't advise anyone to do that. I absolutely don't. But try to work with the company. If they absolutely refuse to do it, you know, even when you're like, it's in a private password protected portfolio, no one will see it but potential employers. If they still say no, then you're just out of luck. I mean, you are, unfortunately. Try to write something on your own, that's your own idea, that is comparable to that you can use instead. And then just say, I've written things in this vein when I was at this other project, and that's really all you can do.
Maybe I expect I'll have something more pertinent to say to this, but maybe a thing that you have when you've been in the industry for a little while is even if you haven't got you know, scripts and kind of concrete assets that you can include, like perhaps what you can do is substitute that in with things like maybe if you've had some content of yours released and there's like a YouTube video of some people playing it, you know, like, or maybe there's things like a review that says something nice about the sparkling dialogue. You know, I would think that kind of like secondary material that pertains to your work is probably also, you know, I wouldn't mind seeing that sort of thing. Certainly, I can remember people sending me links to you know, YouTube videos of playthroughs of their games and saying, look, I wrote this thing and here's some footage of someone playing it. But yes, yep. if the thing never got to release even after your 10 years in NDA, then you have to know what to do about that. That's harder.
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage that. If anything made it public that you can point people to and say, hey, that was what I worked on, great, do it. But I mean, unfortunately, sometimes you work on a project for 5 years and it's canceled or something happens and you're just not allowed to share anything related to that. It's really unfortunate that you can't violate the NDA. Most companies that I know of, even ones who are very, you know, stern about NDAs, are usually willing to let you work something out with them. You know, you probably can't show artwork, you probably can't show an entire screenplay, but you might get permission for like a page or something. So it's worth asking.
Yeah, I think those last two are really good advice. I think actually, so the corollary to my earlier thing about people don't like to read is people love watching videos in 2021. That's the thing everybody doesn't mind giving some time to. So even if it's you playing through the material of a released game and recording it, if you can give them hyperlinks to YouTube or Vimeo videos that they can watch of your stuff in action, you know, assuming that it was executed fairly well, that might even show you off to better advantage in some cases than the scripts themselves. I think it is. I'm not contradicting anything Anna said because she's absolutely right about the NDAs, but there is also, at least I know, in Seattle anyhow, and there's a bunch of game companies in Seattle, there is a sort of tacit understanding. I mean, everybody in this city works everywhere eventually, you know, at Microsoft, at Bungie, at Valve, at Amazon, and there's kind of a tacit understanding that, you know, if you're an artist and you've got concept art, for example, that you did for a thing, particularly if it has been released, if you put that behind password protected wall online, there's a sort of understanding that this is how people go about showing their work and getting jobs. And so nobody's going to come down too hard on you. But again, I think she's absolutely right that you want to keep it small, you want to keep it focused, make sure that it's stuff that does show you off very well. I'm fortunate in that the company that I worked at first in this, well, that I've had my first full-time job, which is pandemic, no longer exists. And so they can't hound me for showing any of the stuff that I did for them. But it is
right from the grave to come get
I know,
you.
right. But it can be frustrating for sure, because we all work on stuff that ends up not getting released. And ideally in those situations, you'd like people to give you permission to show some of the work if possible to help you get employment, but they're not always willing to do that. So yeah, you gotta think outside the box sometimes, for sure.
Yeah, and just to jump onto something that Ed said earlier, if there's a video of something that you have released, it's okay to make a transcript of the writing from that video. And, if you happen to put that into a screenplay format and it's just a transcript of something that's already out there, who's to say that that's wrong? Just throwing that out there. As long as it doesn't violate your NDA, and I just want to keep hounding that point.
Sure. But it's in the public domain at that point, right? I mean, hey.
You're just sort of reverse engineering something that anyone could do. You're, as long as you don't reveal anything that's not already out there, you should be fine.
That's awesome, thank you. So I've just been flicking through some more of the questions, and just before we move on to the next one, just a clarity point, because I see a lot of people have asked this, but earlier on when we were talking about your portfolios being no more than 10 pages as a guide, when we talk about that, we mean for the entire portfolio. So it's not, 3 samples of 10 pages each. It's one portfolio, 10 pages max.
Yeah, well, so most of the time, or at least a lot of the time, the job description will be specific. They will tell you what their requirements are in terms of total number of pages, in terms of how many different samples, if that matters to them, all that kind of stuff. And that's why I'm a fan of having a portfolio of your own that has a number of different things, different genres, different tones, moods, styles, lengths, so that you can hopefully already have stuff that you can put together, sort of in a buffet style based on what they said that they wanted. And obviously that's easier to do when you've been in the business over 20 years like I have, than it is when you're just starting out, in your third year of writing. But that just enables you to be responsive to what they're telling you they want, but also to be prepared to do it sort of on your terms and show your best stuff off.
Yeah, I recommend having a website or a Dropbox or someplace where you can keep all of your samples, you can keep links to all of the videos of your work. And then password protect that, and basically just send that link in with your application and let people access it, and then tell them what in there you think will be of particular interest and meets the criteria for what they were asking for that particular job. And then if they're interested and they get in there, they might start clicking around and look at some of your other stuff. I certainly have done that. I've been like, ooh, I'm in this person's Dropbox. What do they have in here? And I have actually ended up looking at a lot more than they had sent me that way. I actually find those compiled PDFs that people send where they put 3 or 4 samples into one PDF. I find them confusing. And I sometimes just keep reading and it all sort of runs together. That's just me. And I know it doesn't bother a lot of people. And that's in some cases the preferred form of doing it. But yeah, if we're requesting 3 samples, no more than, 2 to 5 pages each, that should max out at 15 for those guidelines. Yeah, just remember that half hour we've grabbed to look at your work.
Yeah, I suppose I feel like something that we've specified in our job ads in the past is that we also like to see things like twine games and or if you've got something in it written in ink or like a Bitsy game or something like that, which don't sort of squarely break down into, it's hard to say how many pages a twine game is, I suppose. Because some of them can be very long and some can be very short. But I would think really yes, it's exactly what Anna said. To think about somebody who hasn't got a very long time to get into this thing. If your twine game is the kind of thing where it's not really going to get to the good bit that's gripping until I've played through your long and beautifully wrought, prologue. But then you get to the bit that's really kind of stands kind of halfway through. Maybe consider that perhaps that Twine story just straight off the shelf might not be quite appropriate to include. Maybe you could just, make a cut down version of it that starts off with one of the most important parts. And even then you could say like, here's a link to the full version if you want to do it. I don't like it when you get an application, you find a link to somebody's itch.io page, and then you can click onto their profile from there and have a look at everything else on their itch.io profile. That always feels a bit like, maybe you're going to discover sort of buried treasure that way. Yes, I mean, it's what do we say? It's hard to dial into a very specific sort of estimate on account of the fact that different media exist differently in the digital world. But the important thing is that it's punchy and it gets to the important thing very quickly. Maybe ask yourself, like, well, if they stop reading after 10 minutes because somebody rings their doorbell, will they have gotten what I need them to get from this? And that might be a good heuristic. I don't know.
That's an excellent point. I'm really glad that you made it. Yeah, if you have a 10-page screenplay, but only 2 or 3 pages are the really good stuff, just send us those 2 or 3 pages, contextualize them for us, and make sure that we read the good stuff. And you also mentioned Twine games, and I'm really glad that you did, because companies like BioWare specifically ask for like Twine games or some sort of interactive game like that. They do. And I think, particularly for like a narrative design job, we want to see the logic behind why you made those choices. So, you might want to present that in your portfolio as like a flow chart. Like, this is how I arrived at it. Here's the screenplay of the dialogue, and then here's the playable game. Let us sort of inside that thought process that lies underneath that game. And that's really cool for me, because I will be working with you on the nuts and bolts of it to get to that final product. So it's cool for me to see all the pieces that add up together to that final polished work.
Absolutely. Yeah, I very much agree with that.
That's fantastic. Thank you. So going back to questions, a really good one here. So from Oliver, who says in their portfolio, they've developed an original Assassin's Creed concept. Are franchise ideas something you'd want to see in a tailored application, or would you prefer something completely original?
So I know from my point of view that I have a I assume you mean an Assassin's Creed concept with a view that you would be sending that to the developers of Assassin's Creed, for example. We have a line in our job ad which specifically says that if you have spec scripts for Love Island the game, don't include them specifically. And I can talk about the rationale of why, perhaps, if that's interesting. But I mean, just in general, I would suggest that no, that's probably not a very constructive thing to do.
There are legal reasons why we can't look at someone's idea for a franchise that we're working on. We might already have that idea and be working on it and might be in the game already. And then if you send it to us, it's plausible, at least from the outside, that, we saw that and included it in the game. So we can't even risk that. There's just a really good, solid legal basis for it. I wish it didn't have to be that way, because wow, it would be really cool if we could ask for things that are exactly what we need. But unfortunately, it is like that. And sometimes in the writing test, that might be the place where we can ask you to write something, that is in the same style or, with the same tone or whatever as the franchise you're applying for. And that's the opportunity to whip out your Assassin's Creed fanfic and, repurpose it into something that we could look at for the test.
Yeah, that's a really good point, the legal one. And to elaborate a little on what Ed said, in Hollywood, there is a sort of unspoken rule in television and circles of television writers that the last thing you want to do is send a spec of a show to the show. And the reason for that is that it's virtually impossible that you're going to know the show better than the people who make it. And so every little thing you do that isn't exactly in the voice of a character, that isn't exactly consonant with the approach that they want or the kinds of stories they tell, or, all that kind of stuff, it doesn't matter how small an error it is, they will see it. It will jump out at them in neon lights and make them want to run away from you. So I think that's actually a pretty good rule to adapt to our medium as well. Again, you know, if you're applying, you know, to do Assassin's Creed or Halo or an established franchise, and granted, nowadays that happens an awful lot. That's unfortunately in AAA, at least, the vast majority of what goes on. Having something that's similar enough to show them you can sort of do something in the same vein, but not actually their thing, is probably the way to go.
That's really great. I've never thought of it that way as well, that, you know, you could effectively be distracting the hiring manager from the quality of your writing, just because of a couple of things like, oh, well, that doesn't actually happen, or you've got that little bit wrong there. So yeah, that's really great advice. Thank you. So something that I've seen a couple of people ask around portfolios is, are there any common mistakes? You know, as hiring managers, is there anything that, you know, if you see in a portfolio, it's an immediate turn off? You know, you see something and you go, nope, close it and move on. You know, is there anything that jumps out at you as a don't do?
I mean,
so
oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to say, I'm happy to just like hit the super obvious ones first up. Like, you'd be astonished how many portfolios come through that have like conspicuous typos very near the beginning, or you know, sort of poor grammar or this sort of thing. So that's just, you know, just do hit the spell check. I think that doesn't take long. For me, the thing that most frequently causes me to turn off account, well, something that will always anyway see it, is when there's something in the script where like a character is being somehow misogynistic, or they're being if there's something in there that kind of strikes me as distasteful based on, I don't know, my own ethical parameters, I suppose. But like, even if it is the case that in the context of this piece of work you've got, there's a character who says something that is unpleasant, I would consider maybe not including that, because I'm going to read that and I'm just going to go, well, here's the person who the first thing they want me to know about them is that, you know, there's a certain type of language they're comfortable throwing around in a professional context, you know, for example. So I would say, yeah, be careful of that. Again, it's one of those you would be surprised sort of things, but how many people do just, you know, I'll just be like, well, this person, this script is incredibly distasteful, that's why I won't read any further.
Yeah, I agree with that completely, and I can say that we have turned down people at the very last stage of things, after they've come in and done a full loop with us and everything, because it became clear that they had social attitudes that were not consonant with the values of our team and our game and our player base, and that was not okay. And it's, you know, it's unfortunate when that happens, especially if the person seems to be a fairly decent person and just doesn't realize that maybe it's not smart to wear those things on your sleeve exactly. But regardless, I think it's a good thing to keep in mind. Excuse me. Other things that will tend to make me close the sample and walk away. If your script starts with a page and a half of action description, unless it's really well written, really concise, basically in 2 or 3 line bites, and even then, I mean, it really better be pretty damn good. It better be French Connection good. You know, I'm likely to walk away. If you don't seem, by the same token, if you have if everything is all dialogue and it's going, the lines are going on, they become monologues and they go on for a page and a half, unless that's the point of it. In other words, if you don't have a sense of what sort of the basic, you know, values of economy in what we do are, because that is a thing, particularly when you're talking about spoken word, those are, you know, actors that we spend money hiring and recording in a VO booth, and time is money in the most real sense in that situation. And so something that feels bloated, that feels overlong, what you're showing me is that you are still sort of beginning at this craft and you don't really understand it that well. And I think that's the main thing. Like, I keep an eye out for instincts. I keep an eye out for, you know, what I think your talent is, but of course talent is not skill, right? And as I said before, number 1 criteria for me is demonstrated writing skill. preferably on the page, but I'll look at the video too. If you had a thing that was released, that's fine. I you know, as I said, I don't mind reading a lot, because I usually don't have to read the whole thing by far before I know sort of what my answer, whether I want to move forward with the person or not. But you know, giving samples that respect the time and the intelligence of the people who are going over them is never a bad idea.
Sorry, that's my cat, you all. She's very upset that I'm ignoring her. So I would add to this, you know, I just sort of want to keep going with what they were saying about personal distaste. I mean, obviously this is, you know, different people are reading it. They have different taste levels. You know, what I find distasteful might not be what someone else finds distasteful. But when you're reading someone's work, you can learn a lot about someone as a person by what they include. And this is presumably them on their best behavior. They're sending this into you. It's almost like it's an audition, it's a job interview, it's a whole bunch of things all rolled into one. If they're putting sort of controversial or unpleasant or crude or just really questionable things into these first samples, and it doesn't serve an obvious purpose, it's there just to be there, and you sort of get a sense that that's who this person is, you start asking yourself if this is someone you want to work with. I remember that I had a conversation with a recruiter at one studio where I had read these samples, and he's like, well, you know, he looks really good on paper, he's got all this experience, and I'm like, I just don't like him. I come out of his sample just being like, he was a guy I just didn't like. Like there was something mean-spirited about it. And like, I couldn't put my finger on it, but I had some other people read the samples to make sure I wasn't just, you know, letting my personal feelings get in the way. And everyone said the same thing, that this was just someone they didn't want to work with. So think about that. Have your friends read your samples, have your friends look through your portfolio and tell you what kind of person you're coming across as through these samples that you're putting there, because you might be giving an incorrect impression. So that is a deal breaker for me. Another thing that I think it's just a huge turnoff is if you completely ignore the brief. Like, we've given you those instructions for a reason. This is an assignment like we will be giving you at work. You know, I as your lead will be like, hey, I need you to do this thing. It's due by this date. Here are your parameters. Go, give me something. And if you just ignore that and you come up with something on your own, and, you know, maybe you're a maverick. I don't know why. You know, I don't know why people do these things. But, you know, and you just ignore what I've told you, you know, in professional terms, that means I'm going to have to throw your work out, or someone's going to have to redo it, or we've lost a lot of time. And that's what you're telling me. You know, I'm talking, I guess, more about the writing test right now, but it's the same thing. Like, if we've asked for something, give us that. If I say no more than 5 pages and you give me 7, what are you saying to me? I think you need to stop and ask yourself those questions. Why are you giving me 7 pages when I definitively said 5? Yeah, so those are the deal breakers. I'm gonna start ranting in a minute and throwing cats everywhere, and like, we don't want that. So, but yeah, I mean, I will stop reading after 5. So make sure that you get what you need in before those 5 are up. You can add 7. I just won't read those last 2.
I've got one other horror story that this brings to mind, which is that so obviously the sort of game that we make in these books, you know, it's a mobile game. It's based on a reality TV show. It's you know, perhaps fair to say not to everybody's taste, and it doesn't kind of it's not perhaps consistent with a lot of people's ideas of what like a kind of a gamer's game is, right? You know, it's you know, that it's deliberately, you know, designed with accessibility in mind. You know, it's geared towards a different demographic. I think it's one which has traditionally been catered to by games and so forth. All of this I know very well, but like the thing that that I still see every now and then in applications is people who will kind of try to contextualize their relevance for it by sneering at the type of game that we make. That will get people who will say, like, you know, well, I mean, you know, how hard could this be? It's just, you know, choosing which boy to kiss. Like, you know, so I mean, in that respect, I think I'm definitely well equipped for it. You know, and in the context of which I've got, you know, well, on the one hand, you know, you're asking me to, like, you know, trust the, you know, my game and my team and my audience are like 3 of the most precious things in my life. You're asking me to just kind of hand them over to you, despite having said that you don't really care too much about them. So that's definitely, you know, be respectful of the fact that, you know, people who are making a game even if it's the type of game that you personally don't really like, if you're applying for it, the people that make it probably care about it. You know, it's probably something that they've invested a lot of love into, and you know, they're probably not going to take too kindly to you being dismissive of it out of hand because it's not quite your cup of tea, you know.
It's like those people who write to me about my website to point out all the typos on it and tell me that they can help me with it. I'm like, I don't know you. I don't like you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that approach never works quite the way those people expect it to.
No.
I don't know what they're expecting, but Anna, we've had a request to see your cats. Are they in the room and shareable, or no?
No, sorry, you all. I will post pictures of them as I do every day on Twitter. So
I can offer a consolation dog.
Oh,
She was supposed to be downstairs out of the way, but she came up to see me, so she's having a sleep with me.
If a cat wanders in, I promise to drag it howling in front of the camera. But it was just my elderly cat poking her head in to ask me why. How dare I? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Point made, so she left.
Excellent. So piggyback on that, we always just heard like the horror stories, but on the flip side, do you have any stories that you can share about maybe times when you've read a portfolio, you've read a sample, and it's been a standout, something that's just made you like instantly pay attention, or maybe give an opportunity to someone that maybe doesn't, I suppose, fit the mold of a traditional games writer? Like just any of those stories, of those wow moments that you might be able to share.
Yes, I have. Sorry, am I speaking too much? Do cut me off if I am going to. I have a few. I think the one that I will point to, I alluded to earlier actually when I was talking about how sometimes somebody includes a link to an itch.io page and something kind of comes through out of that you find the buried treasure. But like I suppose the thing is that partly what I want to see when I'm looking at applicants is this a person who I'm going to enjoy working with, right? Obviously I have the important stuff that my game is very valuable to me and it's someone I can trust with it and so forth. But I just remember one time clicking through on somebody's itch.io page and there were 4 or 5 little bitsy games in there, and some of them were funny and one of them was very strange. I mean, all bitsy games are very strange. One was very strange, and one of them, which they hadn't referenced on their portfolio, but as I was playing through that, it was really sad, and it really kind of got me very squarely in the emotions. I was sat there at my desk, transported. And I suppose the kind of generalizable lesson that I would take from that is that perhaps something, we've articulated, I think, a lot of things that you should aim to do with your portfolio, but something that you should not forget to do is to make sure that you get yourself in there, right? Because us people that review these things are people, and we ultimately want to kind of make a connection to a person. And when you've read 4 applications in a row that each start with the first 5 pages of someone's kind of gritty detective story, so you get something that is kind of weird and feels very personal and heartfelt and a little bit kind of affectless in that way is very refreshing. So I guess maybe this isn't a very good advice, I don't know, but I was just try and put some of yourself into it, right? Try and be personal. Try and get whatever thing is weird and delightful about you somewhere in there at least, so that because maybe the person reading it will jive with that, and because if you can show that you're adequate at craft, that's fine. But if you can get a bit of art in there and have them admire you as an artist as well, that's probably going to stand you in great stead, I should think. I don't know. That's my point.
There's a couple things a couple of people that come to mind for me, and I want to try to find the link between them that sort of has a piece of valuable information. And I think what I'm going to do is go back to the idea of the person that you are. It matters a lot to me, if I'm hoping to be working with you for several years, that you be someone who's going to be a good culture fit, or if not a culture add to our team. And sometimes that aspect of a candidate is not necessarily as easy to suss out immediately, but sometimes it's so powerful that it really puts a hiring manager in a position of going, okay, do I think I can sort of handle the things that need to be brought up to speed, and you know, because it's such a good fit in some ways. But I think of some people, I think of Samantha Walschlager, who was someone who had been working with BioWare, both in she was in Austin, but also did some work for the stuff they were doing in Montreal, and this is early on in my time at ArenaNet. We were really like our backs were against the wall. We were having to do a lot of hiring very quickly, and I also knew that we needed to start with some really solid senior people so that we would then have the freedom and the flexibility to bring in some folks who were appealing in other ways and that we thought would be good adds to the team, but might not be to the same level yet as game writers. And the funny thing about Samantha was that we kept talking to more senior people who had worked with her, who at the end of the interview would say, "Have you talked to Samantha Walschlager?" And after a while, you start to notice that, and you pick up on it, right? And she had, excuse me, this comic book that she had just done. I feel terrible because I can't remember what the name of it now was, but it was basically it was like a Western. It was almost like Butch and Sundance, but with women instead of men. And it was just really good. It was really, you know, the values it displayed, both from a storytelling point of view and from a cultural point of view, were things that really aligned with ours. And it was just good writing, and it was snappy and all that kind of stuff. And when she came in, it was so clear that she was someone, whether she, you know, she wasn't as senior as we were sort of hoping, and maybe she needed a little development, but boy, oh boy, was she going to be a superstar and a real add to the team already. And we hired her, and she was, and a lot of folks' favorite stuff in season 4 is stuff that she wrote. She has gone on to be a narrative lead and a narrative director at other companies. We have quite a few people from our team who have done that, and it makes us very proud. Another person who I think about that is Julian Arden, who I referred to earlier. That was the person who'd never worked in games, was a theater person, had produced a lot of immersive interactive theater, and she was such a perfect interview. I mean, perfect. That after we had spent a day with her, I was talking to folks on the team, and I'm like, I just don't feel like I know who she is as a person, because she gave us this perfect facade. Every answer was exactly right. You know, like, and so I did a really weird thing, which I don't think I've ever done before or since. Which was, I called her and asked her to come in again. And I just sat down. If you've ever been to ArenaNet, you know, we have these fireplaces, which in the winter are very, very cozy, because you can see, like, you know, sometimes snow outside and stuff, but the fireplaces are there and you're sitting in little chairs by them. And I just told her that. I said, you know, you're a terrific interview, maybe too good. I'm not sure. I know, just like, tell me who you are, you know, what are the things that jazz you? What do you like? What are your hobbies? Stuff like that. And she instantly did that. And it was amazing, and she was amazing. She's the person who within a month made herself an expert on Guild Wars 2 lore more than anybody else on the team, including people who'd been there for 10 years. And she has gone on to be narrative lead at Bungie. I think of Novira King, who we have a mentorship program that we run, which is mainly designed to help folks from underrepresented groups in the industry, women, people of color, people who identify as queer, help them even the playing field and get into the business. If that's with us, great, but lately we haven't always had the heads to be able to spend on it. So if we're doing it for the industry, we're helping them network, we're helping them build portfolios. That makes us happy. We want that to happen. Very occasionally we get somebody like Novira King, who had been working in live TV production for 10 years or more, and other stuff in related entertainment industries. She's Black, she's Muslim, and you know, on paper, yeah, she wasn't ready to be hired onto our team. she got into the mentorship program, and within literally 3 days, it was blindingly clear that this was a person who was much more qualified to go ahead and be effective and productive on our team than had been apparent in any way. And as soon as we could possibly make her full-time, we did, and she has gone on. She did amazing things for us. She and Julia sort of conceived our most recent season, the Iceberg Saga, which ends, the finale's out today. But Novira was the main person after Julia left who really executed on it and led it. She was the lead on it. And now she's the narrative director at Undead Labs. So the point I'm getting at is, again, show yourself off, right? I mean, you've heard a lot of stuff about how do I make sure I'm showing myself on the page, and in a way that's quick and that's right here and it's in your, right up front, and nobody's going to miss because they may not read too much past the first few pages. That is super important. Don't be afraid to show who you are. I loved what Anna said earlier. We're not intimidating. We're real. Like, I understand why it might feel that way sometimes, but we, especially in narrative, we're in narrative because we are emotional people, and we care, we have empathy, and we care about relationships and human beings and what makes them tick. And we want to know you. We want to know who you are. I think in most cases, most hiring managers in our discipline do. Don't be afraid to show that. I see a lot of people on Twitter talking about imposter syndrome, and I get it. We are an industry that attracts people who are fundamentally insecure on some levels, right? But by the same token, understand and you try to put yourself in the frame of mind of, you have something valuable to bring, and maybe it's not apparent to a cursory look, right? But you want to make sure that a hiring manager is going to see it, whatever it is, whatever those things are. Foreground those things. We want to see them in you. Again, I will say, I'm looking for reasons to say yes. I'm looking for reasons to move you to the next stage, right? That's what I want. I'm hoping that you're going to be the biggest rock star ever, and I'm going to give you every chance to prove that to me. And only when I am convinced that it's not your time will that change. But frankly, if you've gotten to a pretty late stage, a lot of times what we say to folks is, this isn't the ending of a relationship, it's the beginning of one, right? Especially folks who aren't sufficiently developed, and we stick with them, and we keep in touch with them, and sometimes we work with them, and we ask them, when you've got new samples where you feel like you've developed some, bring them back to us and let's see where you're at, if that's the main thing. And we've hired a number of people who were on their second, third, fourth time applying over several years, but who clearly had really, really advanced in that time. And that's super exciting. There's nothing that makes me more excited than seeing a writer who's done that. We tell them what it is you need to do to be able to get a yes from us. And if you want to do it, by God, go do it and knock our socks off. I love it when that happens. Be the person you are and let them see that.
I have to follow that. Great, Tom. Thanks for that.
Sorry.
That's really moving, and I think that's excellent advice for the entire process, not just for portfolios, because that's really what it comes down to. We're hiring a person, we're not hiring your samples, right? And we're interested in seeing who you are through your samples, but that's just one small window into who you are, and I think Tom really eloquently addressed that. But I am not Tom, and I will never be as kind as Tom is. So I'm gonna.
Or he's gullible.
Well, I'm gonna stick with kind. So I'm gonna take us back to portfolios. I will say that as someone who has hopped from studio to studio, I see a lot of the same people applying for positions at various studios that I've worked at. And it's exciting for me to see that they've changed, that they're submitting new samples, that if they make it to the writing test, that they are doing much better on this writing test. It can also mean that I recognize their work too, and they haven't changed their samples or they haven't improved, and that's really disheartening for me. you know, so don't, if you know that I'm going to be the person probably looking at your writing samples and you got turned down for a job before by my, you know, by a recruiter at a studio where I was likely the hiring manager, please don't just send me those same samples. Try to find something new that I haven't seen that shows me you have grown, that shows me the ways in which you have grown, and that you are now the candidate that I did not think you were before. Show me that I was wrong and that this time I should hire you. I think that's really important, to show your growth so that I can see it. To talk about an example where I saw something surprising in a good way in a portfolio and not just a scream-inducing way. Sometimes game writing isn't very flashy on the page. It's very plain. I sometimes say that it doesn't draw attention to itself. It's almost invisible writing in some ways. And so sometimes you're reading a script and it doesn't really mean anything. And I was reading this one screenplay and it was about a girl's farewell to her grandmother, and it wasn't coming across well, I'll put it that way. And I probably, if that was all that I had received, I might have thrown it out. But she had also included a twine game and then a video she had made with some animations to go with it. And I watched those, and when I was done, I was in tears because it was very clear that this was a personal story, that this was her grandmother. She'd included pictures and music and things that made the words she had written come to life. And the dialogue spoken felt very natural, and it felt very natural for the scenes that she created. And something that was kind of dead on the page in this one particular case just sang when it was brought to life in the game and in the video. And I have never forgotten the power of that, of saying, you know, some people just look better when you can see it in context. And I was really glad that this candidate had understood that about their own work and had included the means for me to really understand what they were doing. And of course, we called them in for an interview. But I mean, that was a very smart move on their part. You know, self-knowledge is a powerful thing, to know that sometimes the screenplay you've submitted isn't quite enough to get your message across. So yes. And also the people you mentioned are really cool, Tom.
They are. They're good follows, all of them. So
I like them both as people. They're lovely. Or actually, all three of them.
All three. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
That's all wonderful. Thank you. I love that anecdote of yours, Anna, as well. Like that just goes to show, you know, in some ways, what a tough job we have in trying to put together portfolios, because you're right, like, no matter how you present these words, they are words that are meant to be played. So yeah, I love that, you know, that idea of having a variety of media, I suppose, in your portfolio. So sure, maybe you have a couple of pages written as a branching script, so you can show that you can do it, but then also have that logic diagram and have that playable prototype and really show that you understand everything that goes into game writing and that you can do all of it competently. I really love that. So we're at that awkward stage where we've kind of got a few minutes left, but I feel like it's not really long enough to do a final question any justice. And to be honest, I think hearing from the three of you on those high points and what's really stood out for you is actually a really lovely place to finish. So Andy and Nadine, this is your warning that I'm going to hand over to you in a moment, a few minutes early. But in the meantime, like, thank you, Ed, Anna, and Tom. You've been a really fantastic panel to talk to. I'm sure the audience have learned just as much as I have and enjoyed it just as much as I have. So thank you so much for sharing your time and your advice and your wisdom with us this evening.
Thanks for having us. I just want to make
the invitation.
Quick plug. We are currently hiring at Playground Games. We are hiring a senior writer, but if you pay close attention, it's possible that sometime soon we might be hiring more than just a senior writer. So just a heads up.
Can I, Ed, unless you had something, I don't know if you were.
No, done. I'm done, Tom.
No, not you, Ed.
Well, I was just going to say, do keep an eye on Fusebox Games, because although we're not hiring writers right now, we do typically a couple of times a year put a job ad live. So do keep an eye on it.
Cool. And we're not hiring right this second, but we frequently are. So if you're in the market to work in Seattle, then by all means, look at us. What I wanted to say to sort of leave folks with as a last thought is, I see a lot of times, so this is what Novira calls overconfident white boys. which is that if we put out a job description that has 5 bullet points of prerequisites, first of all, they may not be prerequisites. They may be sort of fuzzy in that way. They're things we'd like to see, but regardless, you know, a lot of white guys will look at that and go, well, I got 2 of those. I'm applying for this baby, right? Whereas a lot of equally, if not more, competent and qualified folks who are not white guys will look at it and go, well, I've only got 4 of the 5. I won't apply. There's no way that I would get it, right? And I would really encourage folks not to have that mindset, because I promise you, whenever we post a job posting, 3/4 of the applications we get are from white dudes who are in no way qualified or competent to do the job, and we don't spend more than 5 seconds looking at the application. Okay, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to go for it, because you never know what people may be really looking for, or what may vibe with them that they didn't realize they were looking for. And I've certainly hired lots of people who, you know, showed me something that I didn't necessarily know I wanted. And so, you know, have the confidence to do that, whoever you are, when you're applying for a job.
Trust your voice, right?
Yeah.
It's really what it is.
Exactly.
We're desperate for something new to read. We are, if you looked at 200 samples that day, you were just desperate for a new, fresh perspective. If you can show me that, you have an advantage. So yeah, bring it on. Take the chance. What have you got to lose, right?
For sure. You don't go to writer jail if you don't get the job.
Shh, Tom, they're not supposed to know about writer jail. We wait till they're hired and then we tell them. Yeah.
That's yeah, really great advice to follow up. Thank you. And I've seen a few people have asked about social media and handles. So I suppose that probably the best way, and Andy, maybe you're a good one to jump in here, but probably the best way to do it is to follow the Writers Guild on Twitter, because we have been retweeting all the panels with all of the handles of the speakers. So that's probably the easiest way for people just to follow all of you in one fell swoop. Yeah, fantastic. Andy, Nadine, over to you for the close.
Thanks, Samantha.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
You're on mute there, Andy, I think.
Andy, you're on mute.
I muted myself. That's clever. People have spent my entire life looking for the mute button, and I'm the one to find it. The bad news, I also found unmute. But if you snapshot your screen right now, you can get the Writers Guild website, and you can get the video games guidelines. I'm going to flip between that and the next one, which will show the Twitter addresses of the panelists and the organizations involved tonight. I have to say, that moment in Star Wars where they say, like, you could hear a whole planet sort of screaming out, and I heard a whole set of attendees screaming out, and coffee shares going through the roof as everyone rushed to update their portfolios tonight to apply for those jobs. So if you do have shares in coffee beans, well done. That was obviously psychic. So yeah, get polishing those portfolios ready for those applications, and please do watch out for those jobs. Maybe you can work with some of these excellent writers and share skills and bring those to us in the future. Just to do the wrapping up, to remind you that tomorrow we have the panel on dialogue as text, the unspoken secrets of interactive dialogue. So come along and please join our panelists for that. Then it will be procedural generation on Thursday, and Friday is implementing game narrative. Thursday also we have the Artisy channel, which we'll be following with an introduction to the Artisy software on that. After that, I will round up by just saying, if you can follow that scream of delight that you had for those job openings with a round of applause, a fanfare, a general screaming out to our panelists. We can't hear it right now, but we will feel it through the ether. Please do follow all of these wonderful people, because I know that they put out a lot of advice as well on Twitter and on other social media. So there are other ways to stay in touch. So a very quick thank thank you to the Writers Guild for hosting this, for RTC for sponsoring the event and for making it possible, to all of you for taking your time to come along, your precious time to come along today to listen to the thoughts that were here, and to our wonderful, amazing panelists who every time I'm lucky enough to be in their presence, I feel myself learning just by osmosis. So to spend 90 minutes listening was fabulous for me too. So thank you very much for your insight and your wonderful natures today. And with that, I will say thank you very much. Hopefully we can all meet up in person once the world has changed a little further. Enjoy your writing. Hopefully see you at some more events, and good night.